Welcome, you're watching World Talks and I'm your host, Claudia Czerwinska. Pope Francis is still critically ill as he battles double pneumonia, but his condition has shown a slight improvement, the Vatican said on Monday. The 80-year-old pontiff spent another night in Rome's Gemelli hospital, making it the longest hospital stay of his nearly 12-year papacy. Many faithful across the globe, especially in his country, pray for his recovery. Many remain concerned. To talk about the Pope, the man and the pontiff, I'm joined by Pullella, former Vatican correspondent for Reuters. Welcome to World Talks.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. So you're closer to the circles in the Vatican. You've been a correspondent for Reuters for several years. From your perspective, how concerned should the faithful be when it comes to Pope's health right now?
Well, actually, I was with Reuters for 40 years covering the Vatican. But look, the Pope is an old man who's 88 years old. So a certain amount of concern is absolutely necessary. As you said before in your introduction, he is still in critical condition, slight improvement. Did not have any kind of asthma-like attacks yesterday. The latest that we have is this morning that we're told by the Vatican that he had a restful night all night long. And so that is also a good sign. But obviously there should be quite a bit of concern because he's still in critical condition and because of his age. And because of a number of factors, including not least that he is missing one part of his lung, that the situation is still very dangerous. We should get in about an hour the latest medical bulletin, which would cover the course of today.
So we've heard a lot of information, some of it very conflicting. Is it because the information channels are not very clear, or is it because the Pope's condition is changing so rapidly?
Well, compared to the past, the medical information has been quite precise and quite clear. It's only once every 24 hours, so obviously in a 24-hour news cycle world, that doesn't satisfy everybody, but they have been pretty precise. First couple of days, there was very little information coming out because he had gone into hospital after a rough period back in the Vatican where he was having cold continuously and bronchitis, etc. So I think they had to assess the situation for the first couple of days. But in the last few days, the situation, the information that has been given out is actually quite clear and accurate. Friday afternoon, the doctors who are actually treating him held a press conference, which they're expected to do again in the next few days, depending on the situation. I would assume that if the situation deteriorates significantly, they will hold another one. But I think we can believe that what is coming out of the hospital is accurate and true to his situation.
I guess the question that a lot of people ask themselves in case of such an emergency is who is in charge of the Holy Keep in a situation like this where we consider that Pope is not feeling well, and considering his position, to what extent is he actually involved in what's happening in the Vatican?
Well, the Vatican law, canon law, church law, has no real provision for who runs the Vatican, the Holy See, in the absence when a Pope is ill. Or when he's even seriously ill, there are absolutely no provisions. The structure exists and it continues to function as any large bureaucracy would do without the top person at the head. The Vatican is a monarchy. The Holy See is a monarchy, and so he is the king. But the day-to-day business continues. Obviously, none of his top advisors can make any kind of decisions that affect faith or dogma or very serious decisions concerning the church without consulting him. And they wouldn't be able to do it even if he could not be consulted, if he were, say, incapacitated, in a coma or whatever. So the day-to-day business goes on. Some people are confused because the nominations of new bishops in various dioceses around the world have been coming out in the past few days while he is in the hospital. But the bureaucratic procedure is such that these decisions were made some time ago, and they are just being announced today on these days because of the nature of the bureaucracy.
So we spoke about the latest when it comes to the Pope's health, but it's also important to, when we speak about the pontiff, to talk about him in his office, so to speak. A lot of people have been on the fence when it comes to the Pope. Some were very supportive of the decisions he made over the years, some less. Do you think that the situation taking place right now has somewhat unified people when it comes to Pope Francis?
Well, I think it has, in a sense. I mean, when you're faced with the possible death of someone, even someone that you have had differences with, usually it does have a kind of a unifying factor, a unifying effect. I mean, just as an example, last night in St. Peter's Square, the Cardinal Secretary of State, who is essentially the number two person in the Vatican hierarchy, he led prayers in St. Peter's Square for the Pope's health, and was attended by a lot of cardinals and bishops and priests, but also thousands of faithful as well from Rome, and tourists and pilgrims who happen to be here either on vacation or for the Holy Year. And up on that stand, among the cardinals who were there, were people who have supported him all the time, and also a few conservatives who have been very critical of him since his election 11 years ago. And so that certainly the events are bringing things together. I got a message from a friend of mine, who's a dear friend of mine in the United States. Excuse me. She's of Jewish background, and she likes this Pope a lot. And she said, if you can, tell him that this atheist is praying for him. So I found that quite interesting and moving. So he does have touching. A lot of people who admire what he's done, even outside the church. Excuse me.
So the pontiff has never been the one to stay away from difficult subjects, especially for the Catholic Church. What are some of the cases when he broke the silence and he actually approached some of those difficult subjects during his papacy so far?
Well, I guess the one that sticks out the most is when he said, just on this first trip returning from Brazil, his famous phrase, "Who am I to judge?" referring to whether someone has homosexual tendencies or not. And he's been very open towards the homosexual community, homosexual Catholic community, defending their rights, but not changing any church law doctrine that is against homosexual sexual activity. So he's certainly not been afraid to talk about that. He has admitted, for example, taken blame for the sexual abuse crisis, which has been going on for a long time. Began well before he was elected. That is something that he has acknowledged. That perhaps that he didn't really understand the situation as well as he should have. Those are the two topics that spring to mind. But right now, as we're looking at pictures from outside the Gemelli hospital, like any papacy that is coming to an end, and we all hope that he gets through this particular health situation. But obviously, at 88 years old, the papacy is, in one sense or another, coming to an end. Like any papacy coming to an end, there's always a time to talk about some of the issues that were important during the papacy. But right now, you can even sense in Rome that this is a time of coming together, as if a family that even had some children who were squabbling with, among themselves or with their parent, and the mother or father dies, you kind of thinking more about the moment rather than the past. And in the case of the church, a lot of people also thinking about the future, about what will happen after Francis dies, which is going to happen, sooner or later. And the future of the church is also on the minds of many people, and what kind of person will succeed him, and that remains to be seen.
Staying on that subject, in terms of his very own heritage that he's created, Pope Francis, what do you think will be the greatest challenges for the person that comes in the future that will have to take this honorable place?
Well, I mean, papacies have always sort of been defined by the period in history in which they occur. And so, for example, I mean, John Paul, Karol Wojtyła, his papacy was defined by the era that he was living in, and many people also say that he affected, and that is the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, starting in his native Poland, as you know well. And the cardinals who elected him in October of '78 believed that he was the right person for that time, not just in the church, but also for the history for what's going on in history at the time. Similar things can be said for why the cardinals chose Benedict to succeed John Paul and why they chose Francis to succeed Benedict. Most of the last two cases, Benedict and Francis, were more about what the inner needs of the church were at the time. Right now, the world is a much more polarized place than it was when Francis was elected in 2013. And I think that and also the church is very polarized as well between progressives and conservatives. It's very, very polarized. In the past couple of weeks that the Pope is in the hospital, that has sort of calmed down just a bit, but that polarization will come to the surface again. And in choosing a new person, the cardinals are going to have to take that into consideration. Who is the best person to kind of heal this inner wound of the church of being so polarized? That is going to be one of the top job descriptions, if you will, for the cardinals when they meet to choose to elect the next person.
And just to finish this off, how would you summarize or perhaps assess Francis's papacy so far? How has he contributed to what we see so far in terms of the positives?
Well, I think that it's very difficult to assess an entire papacy in such a short period of time. It would take a number of books to do that, and even then, a lot of time has to pass to do it properly. But I think that
The first thing that comes to your mind.
The first thing that comes to mind is kind of like to have a more merciful outlook towards people who don't think like you or act like you, whether it's in the church or whether it's outside of the church. He has certainly made the church much more judgmental without changing basic rules. Not only in being more understanding of gay members of the church and other aspects, but it certainly has put mercy above everything, and trying to understand why people do things and to be less condemning. Definitely, under his papacy, the church has been a less condemning church. In the past, many times it was sort of like people saw it as a kind of a finger-wagging church. And because of that, a lot of people moved away from it. But a number of people have come back to the church saying that they feel more comfortable when the Pope is the type of person like Francis is, a less judgmental Pope. Of course, conservatives would say the opposite, that he sowed a lot of confusion by not being very precise, by not being judgmental, by not calling things as they are. And so he himself was part of the polarization of the church that he tried to bring together. Some of his stands, including some of the ones that we mentioned before, the conservatives have accused him of being so vague as to sow a lot of confusion and not sort of but confusing Catholics about what is the rule on such and such a thing by being so vague sometimes. But I think that what will stand out is his attempt to be more merciful and less judgmental.
Thank you so much, Philip Pullella, former Vatican correspondent for Reuters. Pleasure to have
You're
you on the
welcome.
program.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so this would be all for now here on World Talks, but please do stay tuned back here on TVP World in just a moment with more news and features.